Yes.
Director
Okay.
Catherine Grigg.
Wonderful. So thank you so much. It is my pleasure to invite our director and representative for the UNESCO Cluster Office for the Caribbean, Ms. Catherine Grigsby, to bring us the official welcome and introductions. Thank you, Director.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maria. Ms. Stephanie Giannini, Assistant Director General for Education at UNESCO. Ms. Claudia Ribe, Regional Director for the UNESCO Bureau of Education for Latin America and the Caribbean. Mr. Borjen Chakrun, Director, UNESCO Division for Policies and Lifelong Learning. Members and partners of the UNESCO Global Education Coalition. Secretaries General of the Caribbean National Commissions for UNESCO. Education colleagues representing the Ministries of Education of the Caribbean, regional development partners, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is indeed my pleasure as the Director and representative for the UNESCO Cluster Office for the Caribbean to welcome your esteemed participation and contribution to the second Caribbean consultation with the Global Education Coalition. As UNESCO's Director General, Madame Audrey Azoulay, indicated in the framework of the launch of the Global Education Coalition, nearly overnight, we have entered a new age of learning. Schooling has gone virtual, delivered over airwaves and broadband, or just stopped. In the context of widespread school closures to slow the spread of COVID-19, we have witnessed how teachers, parents, caregivers, and students are adapting to an entirely new world of learning on and offline. It has been widely recognized that for millions of children and youth from disadvantaged backgrounds around the world, school closures could mean being deprived of their education and a loss of a vital safety net on nutrition, social protection, and emotional support, threatening their overall well-being and safety. Similarly, inequalities can amplify and deepen, and we cannot let this happen. We should continue deploying our very best efforts to ensure that children and youth keep learning and that every student can stay engaged to continue learning in this difficult time. We must also continue supporting our member states in designing and implementing innovative and context-sensitive solutions that leave no one behind, ensuring that education, a fundamental right, does not stop. It is in this context and in the same spirit that gave rise to the Global Education Coalition launched by UNESCO that the Caribbean consultations have been organized. They are prefaced on a suite of bilateral and multilateral meetings held between the UNESCO Caribbean Office and member states representing the 20 Caribbean territories that we serve. This was initialized by preliminary consultations with the UNESCO Caribbean COVID-19 Education Task Force members convened on April 22, the Caribbean Development Partners Working Group meeting on May 12, and inputs from the Regional Education 2030 Steering Committee meeting on June 10th. Consequently, in response to the feedback from our member states on the challenges and opportunities posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, the first round of Global Education Coalition consultations was held on July 9th, 2020. During this meeting, an exploratory dialogue followed on how the UNESCO Global Education Coalition could collaborate with the Caribbean member states to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on our education systems. Presentations were made by partners of the Global Education Coalition on mechanisms to support the Caribbean cluster in responding to the current and planning for future disruptions to education, with a focus on the three coalition flagships of connectivity, teachers, and gender equality. The goal of this second round of consultation is to leverage the solid foundation laid by first, building on the preliminary dialogue and information exchange on the purpose and expected results of the Global Coalition for Education. Second, identifying needs, challenges, and priorities for potential collaboration with members of the Global Coalition for Education to empower teachers, enable connectivity to close the digital divide, and assure gender equality in the Caribbean region. And third, participating in an exploratory process with Education 2030 partners to support education in the Caribbean context and mitigate the impact of the health pandemic and learning crisis. The Caribbean region must be commended on the extraordinary measures and strategies employed to minimize the impact of the disruptions to education. It is envisaged that this meeting will result in the forging of key potential areas for concrete collaboration with the Global Education Coalition to address the challenges of the Caribbean region. One such priority in this regard is the capacity building support needed by teachers to engage learners with varied needs through remote and blended learning. Multi-stakeholder partnerships enable us to mobilize expertise and resources to respond to the needs and challenges of the Caribbean member states. We look forward to the opening remarks from the Honorable Assistant Director General for Education, presentations from the Global Education Coalition partners, and most certainly, valued inputs from the Caribbean member states on their priorities and recommendations around the harmonizing of efforts. In advance, we also thank the Global Education Coalition for providing this opportunity for the Caribbean cluster. Colleagues, your full participation and contribution is welcome as UNESCO, member states, and our partners work collaboratively to transform the existing challenges into opportunities for strengthening the resilience of the education sector in the Caribbean. In this time of solidarity and partnership, pulling together expertise, talent, tools and technologies from the public and private sectors is fundamental, as this should lead to scale up the best learning solutions for now and for the future. We anticipate an interactive consultation to identify key priorities with the Global Education Coalition to address some of the challenges in the current context in the Caribbean. I thank you. I just would like to know if we have our ADG now.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, ADG. Thanks a lot. Yes, so it is now an honor to welcome you, ADG, Assistant Director General for Education, Mrs. Stefania Giannini. At the advent of this global pandemic, Ms. Stefania Giannini, our ADG Ed, negotiated a common path forward with a multi-stakeholder partnership of 100 or more organizations to come together for a shared agreement to build resilient education systems and the future we want for our learners. She has mobilized enormous teamwork and collaboration across the world to help build resilient education system. Welcome to the Caribbean, ADG. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Catherine, for this nice presentation. And let me say that it's a great pleasure for me to join you in the Caribbean distance, unfortunately this time. But it's a great pleasure and honor to present a bit my personal perspective on the role of the Global Education Coalition, as you know, we lived really very intensely these last 3 months, building a new kind of strong partnership, as you mentioned, launched by our Director General with a single objective, which is to ensure learning continuity for all through a new kind of innovative alliances and a new way of working together, from multilaterals to civil society, from the private sector to academia and media networks. So this is where we are now. The aim is to harness expertise, talent, resources to meet country needs. We started from the very beginning to monitor the process and listen to country needs, and being guided in the process by the principle that are our own principles in any activity that UNESCO put in practice in education, inclusion and equity. So I really very much welcome in its adoption in the Caribbean region. I heard your words, Catherine, so you said already many things I don't want to repeat, but just to let me, in a few words, to summarize the process, the purposes, and also the next steps. We can say that this crisis is an unprecedented one. It has already affected 1.6 billion students around the world not being at school because of COVID-19. And in the English and Dutch-speaking Caribbean, about 1.3 million learners and over 90,000 teachers are affected by the pandemic in 20 countries. So governments in the Caribbean have been very fast, very agile in setting up distance and remote learning alternatives. And let me commend the ministries of education for the scope initiatives put in place, including the use of online platforms, but also not only these innovative and technological tools, also combining in a, we should say, blended learning approach, television, radio platforms, to reach learners in more remote areas and to guarantee continuity of learning to the most vulnerable and fragile components of student population. And this is about political leadership for inclusion in action. And this is what also the coalition still represents in the global picture of the reaction and response to COVID-19 impact on education. What we need going now forward, let me say, is to prioritize education as a big part of the solution to the crisis, and not as a problem. And prioritize education as an investment in recovery. Schools and universities remain closed across the Caribbean countries, and the pandemic continues to evolve. We don't have any, unfortunately, certainty about the future. And that's why we must be very much strong and grounded on evidence, on lessons already been learned, and some solutions and practices that we can see they're working very much well in different regions of the world. It can be replicated or somehow adapted at the context. Governments now are grappling with how and when to reopen schools. This is maybe the most popular topic in the discussion on education. The challenges faced across the region during this time mirrors somehow those globally. Lack of connectivity, very high sometimes prohibitive access costs, teachers struggling many times to deliver distance learning and not being so well equipped everywhere in terms of skills and in terms of preparedness as a whole set of skills to the virtual rooms. Questions on how to take into account the social emotional needs of students are one part of the discussion. How to put in place pedagogical strategies for children with special needs, how to deal with high stakes exams. Well, over the past months, UNESCO has organized a lot of webinars on all these issues, and it was about facilitated peer learning and also giving some concrete tools in governments and ministries' hands. I want to mention the framework for reopening schools that we very fruitfully cooperated about with UNICEF and the World Bank, and recently has been released a series of policy toolkits with McKinsey and company to support countries re-enroll every child. And this is a time of radical change, transformation for education. We talk many times about the transformative role and power of education and the need for education to transform itself in order to become so powerful as the society outside of our building calls to do. And I think that the global coalition exercise is very much about that. It's very much about adapting the system in an agile approach, like a startup mood, I should say, partnering with member states and associate member states in the Caribbean will be really very much, I'm sure, a fruitful exercise and a very concrete response to the COVID-19. This coalition, what can bring to you? Can catalyze the force of various different stakeholders, including mostly the private sector. And while the crisis has exposed inequalities, it can provide really an opportunity to address these new kind of inequalities better, differently, and giving the opportunity to think and act better and differently to all of us. Teachers play a key role. We said in the very beginning, it's not by chance that teachers is one of our flagship. Technology can enhance pedagogy, but never replaces teachers. So it's about, how can I say, leveraging technology on one hand, and on the other hand, valorizing the social human dimension of education. Finally, this crisis is an opportunity to rethink what makes quality education beyond the curricular basics to ensure that students can really gain skills that this century calls for. It's about thinking critically, acting as a responsible global citizenship. Let me summarize around 4.7 that I'm sure will be very much at the very center of the new post-COVID-19 education models and systems. Well, the coalition will also contribute to stepping up the momentum for education. Globally now it counts on over 140 members, and I think that this very large new community committed to help governments, students, teachers, and education players in education can really become a new model of putting in practice our principles. For example, and I conclude with some concrete examples, under the umbrella of the Global Coalition, Blackboard is partnering with UNESCO to support distance learning for students. As part of this commitment, Blackboard will implement a professional development project for teachers on blended learning, as mentioned before, and online strategies in the region. And I think that by pressing some key levers, the coalition can drive change and enable continuity of learning. First, by preparing teachers for distance and blended learning. Second, by enabling connectivity. And third, by assuring gender social equality. I see these three topics being developed in a different way from the past, and it's very much about to get back on track, to valorize innovation, ambition, and helping countries leapfrog to a better future. Of course, our main mission is SDG4, as you know, the roadmap is there, we have a clear mind about that, but now also about SDG4 is time to rethink a bit differently and to find the courage of inventing a system which can be appropriately adapted to the new situation. It's my sincere hope and belief that today's consultation will provide a really aspiring platform for wide collaboration, knowledge sharing, and identifying key priorities to build resilient education systems in the Caribbean. I thank you very much, and I wish a fruitful discussion in the coming session. Bye, Catherine. Unfortunately, I have to leave, but it's been a really great pleasure to join you and your great distinguished guests.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, ADG. We're really honored for your works and for setting really the framework of our discussion and for touching on the very key issues that we will be discussing, this afternoon for you. I think that we have, with your works, we have really, as I was saying, touching the real key issues that we would like to address. And you were saying precisely, I mean, mentioning how the power, the transformative power of education is really what can mobilize us around the key issues that are at stake in the pandemic and the post-pandemic. So we really appreciate very much, ADG, your words, and I'm sure that we will be also, I mean, talking about the needs, the challenges, the priorities to enable education, distance learning, connectivity, the gender equality in the Caribbean as well. I mean, these areas that you have touched already, and also the challenges that we have in terms of teacher training and preparedness for the new reality that we are facing in schools. We are also working in the Caribbean very strongly, ADG, with the guidelines of the reopening schools that you mentioned. And in that regard, we are, for instance, in Jamaica, trying to really move forward together, hand in hand with the Minister of Education for the reopening of schools in September. So this is also part, and we have a very concrete challenge ahead of us there to really make concrete contributions in this respect. So thank you so much, ADG, and we wish you well. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. All right, it's now my pleasure to invite Mrs. Nicole Prenger-Weaver to make her presentation on key challenges and priorities to respond to COVID-19 in Caribbean member states and associate member states. I should like to say that as an introduction that, I was saying that as an introduction that Ms. Nicole Prenger-Weaver is Policy Officer in the Ministry of Education, Science, Culture and Sport in Curaçao. And she's also representative of Curaçao at the Regional Steering Committee for Education 2030. So we're very pleased to have her with us. So Ms. Prenger-Weaver, the floor is yours. Over.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to be presenting the challenges, needs, and priorities of the Caribbean islands related to the COVID crisis, as presented during the Global and Regional Committee meeting of June 3rd and June 10th of this year. The information that I will be presenting concerns the challenges, needs, and priorities of the member states of CARICOM and Curaçao. Next slide, please. I'm not the one managing the slides, so I'm sorry. I'll keep on talking, and the slides will show up shortly. You hear me? Everyone is hearing me? I'm not getting feedback.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. The current situation of the Caribbean islands, or of the new normal, forces us towards a duality. On the one hand, we are doing our utmost to contain the COVID progress, while on the other hand, having to kickstart our tourism in order to increase our economic activities. This creates a level of uncertainty, as we have not yet been able to fully address the challenges and needs that emerged at the beginning of the crisis and our lockdown. Next slide, please. When focusing on the educational field, we have data that states that nearly 1.3 million learners across 20 countries have been affected by the COVID. This is the information of the Caribbean countries region. Furthermore, we also it is estimated that a total of number of 91,710 teachers are affected by the COVID-19 in the Caribbean states. And now at the next slide already. So actually, this brings challenges with it for the islands, and the islands are currently facing in the educational field due to the COVID-19. And these challenges are, as was mentioned before, school closures that challenge the continuity of learning due to the switch to remote and blended modalities. while the education system on the islands were not prepared for this. Consequently, the need emerged for teachers' professional development for the use of this new information technologies and online learning modalities. Furthermore, we have problems reaching the groups of children that are the most vulnerable. Another challenge is that an increase in emotional and physical abuse, child abuse is seen, while teachers still have to be trained in the social and emotional learning skills to address this correctly. Also, a lack of connectivity and access to devices is seen, which is detrimental for the continuity of education during a future lockdown. Next slide, please. The islands are also faced with a lack of data in order to make informed decisions pertaining to learning and learning assessments using remote and distance modalities. An important challenge is also the support of educators for the reopening of schools and lack of budgets to take care of material needs and the school infrastructure in order to make it COVID-19 proof. Out of these challenges, certain priorities emerged. This would be in the next slide, and now now the Caribbean islands as well as Curacao are focusing on. These challenges, these priorities are, for example, teacher preparedness for online delivery. The island, this includes psychosocial needs of teachers, leadership and professional development trainings, education management and in uncertain times, teacher training focused on the use of digital resources, pedagogy and policy development for distance learning, content modification and online safety measures. Second priority of the islands and Curacao is the safeguarding of equity and inclusion in education. This means ensuring the full inclusion and participation of students of different social and ethnic groups, students with special needs and varied learning skills, getting quality learning engagement via the distance learning modality, as well as within the framework of the reopening of schools. The third priority is data management for focused response and informed decision making. It is important to establish an up-to-date and standardized education management system and statistical units, as for example in the case of Curacao, to better streamline national and sub-regional responses to emergency in educations within the current crisis, but also anticipating the further disruptions due to vulnerability that are part of the regions, for example, with natural disasters. The islands also have to emphasize on the importance of the involvement of the Caribbean countries on the regional and global level in management information exchange and the repository of good practices, especially because we have to take into account our SIDS reality. The last priority of the islands and Curacao is the focus on the financial situation of the islands. We are facing budget cuts and are therefore forced to reprioritize the education budgets even for basic education needs. So these are all priorities of the islands based on the challenges that we encountered due to the COVID-19 crisis. And we are working hard on these aspects and are always open for future collaboration and support in these areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this very informative and inspiring also presentation. I think it contributes very well to the discussion that we will be having now with the specificities of the Caribbean small island development states, the challenges ahead, and the priorities, the emphasis where it should be placed. So we thank you very much for this presentation, and I'm sure that we will take it into consideration in our discussions throughout this consultation. So thanks a lot. And I don't know how we are doing in time, but I think that we should move to session 1 now. And in that perspective, I would like to just pass to the chairperson, Dr. Mendes from UNESCO Education Sector, the floor now, so that we can continue or initiate our session one. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Catherine, and thank you all the panelists so far. It's a pleasure to be here joining the Caribbean and to this second consultation session. We had the pleasure to join the first one. Today we have together a set of partners of the Global Education Coalition, and we will be able to go in further details. But before that, and just after the explanation and the speech that our ADG gave in terms of the Global Education Coalition, I would like to mention the importance of the partners that are today with us in this exercise to try to mobilize actors, resource, to have this coordinated approach to try to do this match, you know, what we say, this matchmaking between needs that we just heard from Ms. Brenger-Weaver, you know, in terms of what are the real needs of the Caribbean in this content and how we can match those needs with the offers, with the general support that the members of the Global Education Coalition are offering in this moment. Because in the end, what we want is that, not protect the right to education during this disruption, during this time. And we want to provide distance education and help and support in this planning of distance learning programs along the different countries. So to do that, I'd like to start by inviting, we have today different partners, and I would like to start with Microsoft, that has been one of the first partners that joined the Global Education Coalition. And we have the pleasure to have with us today Alexa Joyce. She is the Future Ready Skills Lead, and together with her colleague Guillermo Lopez Diaz, that is member of the Microsoft Education team for the Caribbean, they will be joining us and presenting what is that Microsoft has been doing with us, with the UNESCO, the Global Education Coalition, and their proposal for the Caribbean. Alexa, once again, thank you very much, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Val, and we're really, really pleased to be able to participate today and to share some of our perspectives about the work that's been done in the Global Coalition and how we might think about supporting the Caribbean region. So I'm going to quickly share my screen so that you can see my presentation. It doesn't want to pick up, just a second. So while I do that, I will introduce myself. So through the coalition, we've had the pleasure of working with countries across the world. I would say where we've gone the deepest so far has been in Africa, and we're very excited to now get the opportunity to work with you in the Caribbean. Essentially, when we started to think about how we dealt with the COVID response, one of the major challenges that you mentioned from Curacao, but we're seeing around the world, is the issue of connectivity. And this is one of the main determining factors about what type of pedagogy and implementation we think is feasible to do in a short term in a COVID response mode. But also we need to make sure that we think sustainably about how we set up the foundations and what we put in place in this period so that it's still usable and can be built upon after we get into the post-COVID world. So we classify education systems and locations within these three areas of no, low, or low connectivity, emerging connectivity, and full connectivity. And in most parts of the world, we're still what we would term to some extent emerging connectivity. Very few countries are able to offer full connectivity and full access to all students. There's quite a few countries in the world which are still in a no or low connectivity scenario, where broadcast media is pretty much the only way to ensure continuous learning. But what we think is really fruitful for countries, and we're seeing this taking off particularly in Africa, and we think it would also be applicable in the Caribbean, is that having a mixed approach, bringing broadcast and traditional media together with using digital platforms for engaging students, is a way to bring a solution in terms of keeping learning going on despite the crisis. And when we think about emerging connectivity scenarios, one of the key issues that we've seen is obviously that students are in households where they may be sharing a device with another family member. It could be a parent's smartphone, maybe that they're sharing a computer with a sibling. And so they don't have access the whole day. And so we need to think about how can we use the technology to also make the most of what they have in terms of traditional learning materials. So it could be as simple as, you know, a teacher creating digital resources by installing a good quality scanning app on a phone, being able to scan worksheets or textbooks, uploading it to a digital platform to be able to share it and send it as an assignment to students, and then students downloading it, working offline on paper, taking a high quality scan and sharing it back with the teacher. So we have to think pragmatically, how can we blend the traditional resources together with the digital platforms while also creating this learning curve slowly, where we build up the skill sets of the teachers so that they're able to really use more digital platforms in a more innovative way as they move through their career. And one of the major things that we have seen being very much used by institutions that we're engaging with, and right now we've been doing research with a number of institutions across the world to look at what are the most used features of online learning platforms. Most of the teachers and students that are using our platforms intensively are actually sharing files. So their teachers are sending an assignment through the Microsoft Teams assignment tool. They're sending a file with a set of instructions for the students. The students are completing that assignment as they have the time and space within the day to do that. And then they're sending it back to the teacher for review and to get feedback through rubrics and so on. For those students who are lucky enough and teachers who are lucky enough to have higher levels of connectivity available, obviously we are seeing synchronous types of pedagogy like this meeting today, where teachers and students are interacting directly. But we don't usually advise that in countries where connectivity is intermittent or the cost of data is high, because it's putting a lot of load on the family to be able to cover the cost of internet connectivity for students to use that. So from a Microsoft perspective, what we do is try to bring together a holistic plan that we can work on with governments. And so what we've been doing is engaging directly with ministries of education, with our education and technology experts, to put together digital identity and credentials together with privacy and security tools so that ministries of education can really manage the process, manage access, identify any areas where sensitive data has been shared, which shouldn't be, but also putting in place the Teams platform as the main teaching and learning hub. There is an education version of it, which includes a lot more classroom friendly features, which teachers enjoy and students enjoy using. We're also seeing many countries going through a process of device procurement, and we are happy to bring on our experts to think about what are the specifications, what are the pedagogical scenarios that you want to build up in a device plan, so that you can choose the types of devices that are going to be most pedagogically suitable for students at different cognitive development stages, or most useful for teachers, as very many countries are finding that due to budget restrictions, it's maybe better to prioritize getting devices in the hands of teachers and thinking about students interacting on phones, for instance. Built into all of our tools as part of a free offering is the data and AI features. So through Teams, ministries of education and teachers can get feedback on what kind of activities are being used, what kind of tools are being used, how frequently they're being used, which parts of the institution and which types of groups, is it teachers or students who are using those tools. So it's really helpful on one hand to understand individual student progress, but it's also really useful at ministry level to understand, you know, has this actually really been adopted? Do we have schools that maybe need more help and more training to be able to adopt it? And then finally, we have a free training program for teachers huge amount of resources available for free in many languages on the internet that we've been curating and creating with our pedagogical experts and our network of global training partners. There's rolling webinars for teachers to join so they can upskill. And we're also making available for free all of our technical curriculum so that students who are at the higher level of maybe upper secondary, beginning of tertiary education, can start to get really professional level technical skills using the free resources that we offer for students and for schools. So I'm not going to dwell on this slide. It's mainly for you to look at after this, this event, where we give you a list of all of the help that we can offer, as well as some links for where to get guides. And now I'm going to hand over to Guillermo just to give some examples of what we've already been doing in the Caribbean to give you some inspiration.
Hi, it is a great pleasure to be part of this professional meeting and to give some initiatives of Microsoft to support the education to continue in countries in the Caribbean. Next slide, please. So in Puerto Rico, one of the first examples that I want to share is the University of Puerto Rico has used the Moodle portal and we help to support them to migrate to the Azure technology for them to create a new version that the 100% are integrated with the Office 365 and Microsoft Teams. They have been using this platform to teach and help students to continue the learning process. In the university high school that belongs to the University of Puerto Rico, we have supported the schools to the students can use Minecraft Education Edition Challenge to engage up students to continue the learning process and have been a great tool to continue the learning process and help them to learn with technology in different ways. Next slide, please. In the Department of Education of Puerto Rico, the Secretary of Education, he decided to use Microsoft Teams as one of the most important tools to continue the education process. And in the past month, we support with one of our partners. You can see there, Eliud Flores, Dr. Eliud Flores Caraballo has helped us to make digital meetings to train teachers in Puerto Rico to support the use of Microsoft Teams. And almost every day we have more than 16,000 teachers participating in this digital meeting. And the evaluation process of this meeting has been a great example of how can we support teachers to use this technology. Next month, we'll be using this type of digital meetings to train other teachers that wasn't able to use this platform before. And we are going to make other webinars for parents and students so they can learn how to use their Office 365 and Microsoft Teams, because one of the problems that we had in Puerto Rico is that sometimes technology professionals and the educational institutions are thinking that all the parents know how to use Office 365, and they have claimed that they need that support, and we will be giving them a lot of webinars so they can be prepared for the next academic year. Next slide, please. Finally, we have helped them to create an Azure platform so they can create additional tools that students can use to prepare themselves with content about Microsoft certification, so that students, when they get the graduation at 12th grade, they will be prepared to work with this certification that Microsoft offers. And they are really excited about this announcement that will be given to them in the next week, and they want to be part of this project. And we are really excited to help them to get prepared for the future and help them to know that we are supporting the education process even in this pandemic process. So this is one of the examples that Microsoft is giving to the countries on the Caribbean, that we are supporting them and we want to help the education to continue even in this pandemic process. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Guillermo, and thank you very much, Alexa, for this very clear, I think, and comprehensive exhibition. And what I would like to remember the colleagues that are joining us today is that if you are coming from a Ministry of Education or a regional, a Caribbean organization, when you are listening to the different partners that will be joining today, it would be great if you can already think in terms of questions, and if you can think in terms of how this organization can support your response to the school closures or the schools reopening. So, because in the end, remember, the goal of this specific session is trying to identify what are these potential areas of collaboration between the Global Education Coalition partners and the real needs that are in the countries and in the region. So with this invitation, I think the presentation from Microsoft was interesting because it's a holistic one, and we'll follow up with another organization that is Blackboard Academy, and we have also the pleasure to have Joel Armando with us today. And Joel, we have been working with her, and we are very grateful because we are right now designing a pilot that is specifically developed for the Caribbean region. So we have the pleasure to have you here with us today, and the floor is yours. Looking forward to hearing you. Thank you.
Thank you, Val. Thank you. And I'm sharing my presentation. Hopefully now you can see it. And thank you everyone for having me and having Blackboard as part of a coalition. We're really happy to be part of this project. And sorry, I'm going to, yeah. And what I would like to talk today is about this project that Val mentioned for the Caribbean. And I would like to share some details of that project because I think this is a great opportunity for the representatives of the member states to have questions or to even recommendations in terms of the project and this pilot that we're planning to do with the Caribbean team. So basically the objective, and really quickly, in case you haven't heard about Blackboard and Blackboard Academy before, we are the largest education and technology company in the world, and we provide technologies for education, for education institutions, but we also provide professional development for teachers and academics in higher education. And Blackboard Academy is the place in which we deliver the professional development for educators. So in this Blackboard Academy umbrella, the project that we are working on with Farial and the team in the Caribbean, it has as an objective to deliver this blended learning and online strategies course, which is an online course. We aim to deliver this course to a group of teachers that will become facilitators and cascade this course to hopefully 200 teachers and then more teachers by them facilitating this course. So the objectives for this year are to enable this group of selected teachers from the member states and then support them when they deliver the course to their own teachers and their own schools in the schools and states. We of course want to contribute to the professional development initiatives UNESCO is carrying on, and the main goal for the pilot is to evaluate the effectiveness of this cascade model, so we can also do similar projects in other parts of the world. So I will tell a bit more about the project and the course, and hopefully I know we are very restricted in terms of time, but maybe we can answer questions after too. So the project, the course that I'm happy Estefania also mentioned is called Blended Learning and Online Strategies. It's a course that Blackboard created specifically for teachers in primary and secondary schools of K-12 education in the States. And it's an online course, which is it has three main components, as you can see in the screen. So the first component is the online course. Second component is a community, and the third component is a set of materials, guidelines, facilitator decks to deliver the course. So basically, the idea is to do a train-the-trainer model. So we provide the course for a group of teachers. We also provide what we call enablement. So we help them to become facilitators for this course. We show them the ways this course is facilitated. We show them the materials and everything. And then once they complete the courses, they not only complete this course, they also complete a facilitation course. They become facilitators. And when they become facilitators, we continue supporting them during the delivery of the courses in what we call a mentoring process. So basically, we meet with them every week to see how it goes, and we provide support on the delivery. We host the courses, so the states don't need to worry about hosting the courses or the materials and everything. So that's even the enrollments and all the online administration of that. That's something that we do in Blackboard Academy. The main role of the local teams is to deliver the courses via the facilitators. And the course that is part of this project is this course, and it's a course that is about 20 hours long. It could be a bit longer, and it might be delivered in 4 weeks. That's the ideal pace that we recommend for the 20-hour course, but it could be more intensive or less intensive depending on the needs. And the topics are the topics that you can see in the screen. So we have an introduction to blended learning and online learning. We talk about and we discuss how to plan online learning experience. So basically this activity that is so familiar for teachers, that is planning their courses, is different when you need to plan for online. So what type of things you need to take into account when you're planning a fully online course or a blended learning course that is different from planning your face-to-face course. How in that case, which different ways you have to provide content to students. I find really interesting, and probably we can also contribute with what Microsoft is doing, because that probably will be one of the ways of providing content. So we don't, in that case, we don't talk about specific technologies. We talk more about best practices on providing content. So how to make that content accessible for all students, how to make it engaging, and so on. Fourth topic is about addressing the needs of diverse learners. So making sure that the design includes all the learners that you may have in your classroom. And this is a very important topic when you teach face-to-face, but teaching online is even more important. And then, okay, some tips and some best practices to using video to teach. And finally, really important, how you keep communicating with the students, how you support your students online. So these are the 6 topics of the course. As I said, it's a course that is fully online. It's about 20 hours of learning. The idea is we try to show best practices in online learning with this course. So the content is what we think is high quality, video introductions, multimedia presentations, but also we make sure that the content is accessible in different contexts and for different type of learners. So we focus on accessibility and offline access too. Some knowledge checks and some practical activities. And this is the course that we will be delivering to these 40 teachers at the beginning in the Caribbean, but also these 40 teachers will take another 2 extra courses, so they feel confident delivering this course with Blackboard technologies, because this is where the course is delivered. So they will take these other courses about Blackboard Collaborate and Blackboard Learn to feel really confident on the facilitation of the course. And then my final slide is a timeline, and I know this might change, hopefully. So this is how we want it to work, but we need to move quickly to make it happen. But the idea is to start as soon as possible with these 40 teachers. So to select, I understand it's two people from each one of the member states, and I inform this group of best candidates to become facilitators, and we will enable them during August and could take a bit of September. we will do an evaluation of how the process went. And at the same time, because again, we are in a very, very particular time, so we need to move quickly. At the same time, we will start the cascade model, so they start facilitating the course for other groups, and we will be evaluating that at the same time. So this is a draft of the timeline. We're working on that, but yeah, it's I'm happy to answer any questions or to follow up with any other comments I might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. We are really looking forward to kick off the training and start working with you. I'd highlight 2 points, I think, from your presentation. The first one is the accessibility, that when we were working with you, we saw that the platform and the content is 100% accessible for different learning disabilities or learning impairments. So this is very interesting. And the second one is the first part of the training, that is the platform agnostic. That is also interesting because the teachers, they don't know about Blackboard or Microsoft. And in this case, your training is offering some basic knowledge and the skills that are very needed nowadays and in the Caribbean as well. And linking to the next, so thank you, Joel. I'd like to pass now to the next speakers, that we have the honor to have Robert Liu, that is coming from Harvard University. And Robert has been actually pioneering, and he just created with some colleagues this fantastic platform that is Lab Exchange. And we have been collaborating with him, and he's sharing one of the UNESCO's share as well, the first one actually in Harvard. And we have the pleasure to have Rob with us today. So Rob, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Val. I should also say that as a Jamaican, it warms my heart beyond anything I could possibly say that we're talking about the Caribbean, because that is my home after all. And so, you know, I mean, anyway, it's just fantastic to be sort of connecting back to my homeland. So Lab Exchange is sort of the new kid on the block. And not just the new kid, but the small kid, because we've just heard from two remarkable behemoths, Microsoft and Blackboard. What Lab Exchange sort of represents is a very different sort of model that's almost designed to nimbly complement any particular learning management system or other system you might be using. So what Lab Exchange was born from was everything we had learned from building massive open online courses on the edX platform. So I founded HarvardX. I was part of the founding of the edX.org system. And what Lab Exchange is what I hope is the next evolutionary step that completely democratizes what's possible in terms of putting you as either a teacher or a learner in the driver's seat. So Lab Exchange has sort of an opening focus really on the life sciences. And what it represents is sort of two things. One key element is that it's a platform. So we've heard a lot about platforms. And the way Lab Exchange has been optimized, however, is that it's a platform that very much focuses on a highly vetted library of public content in science that's fully remixable. It's also very much focused on the basic principle that you want to mix not just multiple media types, but as we all know, you want to intersperse that with formative assessments so that even with asynchronous learning, your students are highly engaged in what's happening. So that the way Lab Exchange works is that instead of having courses, which is what you might expect of a MOOC platform, what Lab Exchange has is a very extensive library that you can search by keywords, filter by the kind of media, sort of, etc. And so you can find individual pieces of content that might be interesting to you. But what's really powerful is that you can actually create your own classes. So what we're looking at here is in fact my Educator Dashboard. And this is the content that I've uploaded into my private library. And what this allowed me to do is in fact create my own online class. So this is an online class that I made this spring when we all had to do the pivot. And the way the learning model is structured with Lab Exchange is that we imagine each class being what we call a learning pathway, right? So that the notion of a pathway is that you intermingle your video, you drop in questions, you pull things from the LabXchange library, you can even pull in simulations, and I'll talk about that in a minute. You add in your readings and your slides, and you set your learning objectives. Now, what I call breakouts are actually questions. And so one thing that's also important is that LabXchange represents not just the power to build classes, not just the power to build your own private library and create private classes that combine your material with the public LabXchange material, but it also allows you to actually track how your folks are doing. So I will flash this very briefly to not violate any FERPA sort of issues, but you can actually track the progress of all of your students in terms of how they're doing. So this is very familiar, right? It is a learning management system, but what we have done is build something that's super lightweight so that you can create a very particular asynchronous experience, and then you can easily connect that data with Canvas, which I've done, with Moodle, with a variety of other learning management systems. So the idea was to create something very nimble and very lightweight around a particular kind of a learning model. So something that's also important for us is that besides the platform itself, we're very committed to science education. So we've built a new series of virtual labs that are all in HTML5. So they don't take a lot of bandwidth at all. They don't require goggles or anything like that, but they're really optimized for the teaching of the scientific process. So that what we've done is created a learning model where with every lab you start out with context, you can explore the materials. Like any good scientist, you need to make some kind of a prediction sort of ahead of time. You take a look at your protocol, you start your simulation, and then you're in a virtual lab environment. And what we've done, because we wanted this to be lightweight in terms of bandwidth, is that instead of focusing on 3D things, we focus on the most important things you have to do with every single piece of equipment, right? So for a centrifuge, you need to make sure it's balanced. You need to set it sort of appropriately. You can pulse it, etc. But you must close the lid. I didn't do that, right? So you can see that it creates an environment where you're actually able to go through your experiment. You can take notes wherever you want. And then once you have gone through it, if we have done it, you get your results. You compare that, what you predicted, with your actual results. You reflect on what you did, and then it summarizes everything for you. And all of that data is stored. So the idea is we currently have 13 of these. We're hoping to create a library of 50 of them with an initial focus on things in the molecular biology and biotechnology field, because we've found those to be very important areas. But this is something that we think represents a particular content type that we're very excited to share with folks. The last thing that I'll share with you, we're also collaborating with the best open source books out there to completely reimagine how textbooks work. So here are 6 textbooks, one from Harvard, the rest from OpenStax. And what we've done is, here's the OpenStax book on biology. We have unbundled the entire OpenStax book. So what that means is that what you're looking at here are the individual chapters in the biological diversity section, in the unit, if you will. And then each chapter actually then becomes a series of individual assets for each section of that chapter. So that now for the first time, instead of saying, read chapter 14, section 3 to 5, you can actually drop in exactly the section of the book that you want your students to read. So the idea here is that we really want to unlock how you can remix and customize narratives. So for example, in my own class, it's about 40% material from LabXchange, 60% is my own private material, and all of it is entirely private and FERPA compliant. But what's also important to know is that, I mean, you can go on LabXchange now. We have literally thousands of live classes right now. You can teach anything you want using the LabXchange platform. But where we're really excited, and why I'm so happy to be here today, is this issue of partnership through UNESCO. And one of the things we really believe in is not just placing you in the driver's seat. By the way, we have about 30,000 parents that have self-reported that they have created classes for their students during this time of COVID. We have about 800,000 users on the platform already. We're only 6 months old, by the way. But the notion of co-development is critical for us. So what we'd love to be able to do is that if you're interested in using Lab Exchange in a coordinated fashion, is to co-develop the professional development training for your teachers. But I think very important to co-develop localized content and curriculum that represents your needs in Jamaica, in Belize, in Trinidad, whichever country you're in, for not just the use by your teachers and students, but to put that into the global Lab Exchange public library so that the rest of the world can learn from a case, from an idea, from a situation from Trinidad. So this notion of co-development is something we absolutely believe in. If you're looking for a strategy where you have internet, this will work very well. If you don't have internet, we're also very excited to talk to you because we're in the middle of developing now what downloadable versions of segments of Lab Exchange would look like. And once we get a sense from you of what the hardware solution is, that as a country or a school district you're interested in working with, we're very excited to work with you on what packets would actually work incredibly well. So if you want to hear more, please email us learn@labexchange.org.
Thank you very much, Rob. It's incredible to see that only with 6 months old, how is evolving, how much is going on. And from the beginning, when you start explaining that idea and see how it's evolving is fantastic. So thank you. And,
yes, and by the way, I should say, Val was a supporter from the beginning. So thank you, Val. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And just, I saw some questions in the chat that ask in terms of the cost. This is for free. So I'd like to reinforce what we are mentioning here, what we are explaining is for free. And I'm sure
free forever.
Perfect. And this idea of co-creation, I think is fantastic. And this, I think, links a little bit with our next presenter that is coming from Learning Equality. Learning Equality is a nonprofit. And we have the pleasure to have today with us Jamie Alexander, that is the co-founder of Learning Equality. It's an organization that has been working with different UN institutions like UNHCR, with us, UNESCO, and they have been doing, I think, an incredible work specifically in countries that they have very low connectivity, and they have been there for many years with a very interesting solutions. But let's allow our friend and colleague Jamie explain. So please, Jamie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Val, and thank you for having us here today. We're honored to continue this conversation with our UNESCO colleagues in the Caribbean, as well as representatives from ministries of education and other collaborators. And we're excited about a fruitful discussion again today. I'm joined here by my colleagues, Karini Diaz, who leads our work across Latin America, and Lauren Lichtman, who leads our partnerships. So feel free to use the chat to ask questions throughout, and we'll be sure to follow up in there. So as Val mentioned, there's actually a lot of similarities between some of the things we've just seen and our work. I think some key differences to emphasize in terms of what we focus on includes the focus on offline and low connectivity, as well as a K through 12 emphasis, serving primary and secondary learners. At Learning Equality, we develop the Colibri ecosystem of open source products because we care deeply about equity. And we've always focused on reaching the most marginalized. And in light of the current pandemic, as we've heard today, these communities are even harder to reach, and the equity gap is further widening. We work to address issues such as limited or unreliable internet, limited hardware, limited time for discovery of quality relevant resources, and just an overall lack of openly available and relevant digital materials. And these issues have become even more apparent with the move towards distant learning solutions amidst COVID-19. So Colibri is an open source learning platform designed for and responsive to learning needs in low resource and low connectivity contexts. So in a typical use case, mini learning hubs with local servers can be created to provide educators with some of the same tools and support that are traditionally only available in internet connected settings in environments that have very limited or no bandwidth at all. Colibri then provides access to a curated and openly licensed, so free, educational content library available in a wide variety of languages, academic and non-academic subject areas, as well as a variety of grade levels, focused primarily on K through 12. Materials that are drawn from the many sources across this library that we've aggregated from around the internet, along with additional materials uploaded by users directly, can be aligned and organized according to relevant national curricular standards using our Colibri Studio platform. Relevant sets of materials can then be seamlessly imported into the offline platform on a local device with simple workflows for managing and keeping it updated. Learning materials can be updated from the internet if there's some occasional connectivity, from a USB thumb drive carried over what we call the sneaker net to somewhere that's completely offline, or from another device over a local network to allow content to leapfrog from one device to another. These materials can then be accessed by learners completely offline from that local server without any need for internet. Learners can watch videos, read documents, play games, interact with simulations, and practice using exercises that have real-time feedback. Within the platform, learners can be grouped into classes and groups and be assigned lessons and quizzes that are created by an educator. Educators can then track the learner progress as they work through the materials and the assigned lessons, identifying learners who are struggling and may need additional support, and can also make use of tools to further differentiate and personalize learning. Learning Equality has also developed the openly licensed Colibri Edtech Toolkit, which is a set of materials that contain pedagogical guidance for support of blended learning, as well as supporting a training of trainers model to help spread the model. So there are a variety of access models, and it really depends on context and depends on needs. Colibri can run on a wide variety of low-cost and legacy hardware devices, which means that existing infrastructure can be leveraged, as well as new supplemental hardware to help fill in gaps. So a few of these access models include a stationary computer lab with local access over the local network, a tablet rotation model within a classroom environment or other learning environment, a hybrid online-offline model with synchronization, as well as a zero-rated model over mobile phones to reduce cost barriers for learners. Soon we'll also be releasing an Android application, fully functional with all of the functionality of the offline server platform, which can be used for self-contained use at home or other scenarios where a local server is not accessible. This open ecosystem of free products and tools supports widespread organic uptake and adoption as well by governments and INGOs at scale. To date, Colibri has been installed in 197 countries and territories around the world. In Latin America, there are over 4,500 known installations of the Colibri server, approximately 300 of which are in the Caribbean, with the largest numbers in the Dominican Republic, followed by Trinidad and Tobago. We're able to achieve this broad reach and organic adoption due to our partnership model, in which Learning Equality collaborates with other organizations in a variety of ways to integrate new content, support new hardware models, and implement Colibri to better understand and respond to diverse needs. At times, we also provide specialized services to enhance the use of Colibri. And all of this is aiming to support the user-driven development and sustainability of the overall Colibri ecosystem. Specifically, in thinking about this partnership model and the specialized support that we can provide, Learning Equality envisions a few ways that we could support ministries in the Caribbean. This includes the scoping, aggregation, and digitization of curricula, as well as alignment of content to national curricular standards, supporting on training of trainers on how to use Colibri and blend technology into a variety of learning environments, along with open education resources, and exploring access and distribution models that are specific to the context, including potential for zero rating or national level servers running Colibri. Thank you so much for your time today. And we look forward to further discussions on how we can collaborate to help ensure continuity of learning for learners across the Caribbean during these challenging times.
Thank you so much, Jamie. And I especially thank you for this effort to try to see how learning quality can engage with the Caribbean. So as you saw, colleagues, we have different presentations, different approach. Maybe for colleagues that are not that familiar with ICT in education, with technology, you can reach us later with some more specific questions. We have another presenter, but we will skip it because he actually could not make his unfortunately feeling unwell. That he was coming from the Video Games Without Borders, but he sent his presentation and it will be available and we'll send to you later on. So with that, we finished this session, and I once again thank you all the presenters, and we'll be able to engage with colleagues and answer your questions through email, and we'll be in touch via another ways because we are running out of time. So I'd like to pass now the floor to my colleague Farial, that she would share the next block that we have prepared for you. Thank you very much. The floor is yours, Farial. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Val, for chairing this session. And I would like to thank all the Global Education Coalition partners for their insightful presentations, and also being very specific about how we can potentially collaborate in the Caribbean region. So, I mean, the presentations were very exciting, and I'm seeing a lot of what you're offering coincides with what our member states are asking us for. So this has been a really great session. I mean, the private sector and civil society are the beating heart of innovations, and we are excited to benefit from your exciting work that you are carrying out. In just a few months, let's say the last 4 or 5 months, we've had a digital evolution that would normally have taken us maybe a couple of years. So we are on a fast track, and so we look forward to collaborating with you. Without much ado, I'm delighted now to turn to our member states. This is going to be the heart of our discussions now. It is my honor to welcome our member states to share their national priorities with us. A few member states are going to be making some presentations and statements of what their needs, challenges, and priorities are at national level. Each country is invited to take about 3 minutes to present, and we are also going to open up the floor. I believe you have the list of by order of alphabet. So I want to make sure we have Angola with us, the first country. The first countries to start would be Angola, Antigua and Barbuda, and Aruba. Are you with us today? We would then continue on with Bahamas, Barbados, Belize, and the British Virgin Islands and the Cayman Islands. So can you please signal to us if you are with us?
Belize is here.
Please go ahead. Thank you. The floor is yours. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch off my camera, and when we have a minute or so left, I'm going to come back on screen as a signal to the presenter that it's time to wrap up. So the floor is yours, Belize. Welcome on board.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'll be pretty brief as it relates to our priorities and the needs for Belize. One thing I must say is that the COVID had taught us that we can push technology and so that we can incorporate it more in the classrooms, whether it is fully online and also blended form of learning. For us, the challenges that we did had was actually equity in resources, I think that is something that would be consistent among the other member states. Having students progress up to date, providing feedback, meeting educational standards, continuity in learning. We know that when students are out from schools, feeding programs are down or at minimum, and even psychosocial support for students and teachers. All amongst with looking at budget cuts that you have. So the different platforms that were presented, actually we have been using on some of them. I must first state Microsoft Teams. We have a project in Belize named DigiLearn, Microsoft Education Projects, which we piloted with some schools where the students actually get laptops, and then the local ISP providers actually increases the bandwidth within the different schools so that they would be able to have that blended or full online experience. This was just before the COVID, and actually they pushed the need for us to actually expand that to more schools. Also, from the presentation, we can learn or integrate other platforms such as the LabX, and surprisingly, Colibri have been used by some of the schools in Belize. That is a unique feature that I think we can look at even more, especially for communities that are very remote and have little to no connectivity. Our main priority, so as to be rather brief, is teacher training. I believe the COVID had taught us that, so that they would be able to be current and meet with their students, whether it is in a blended format or fully online. The issue that we were experiencing, and I believe that we can work on that now, is to provide continuity in education should we actually have another major event like what is occurring now. In Belize, due to the fact that the virus numbers is actually very low, I think to date it's only about 41, 42 persons being infected, with probably about 11 or 12 active cases. We are actually pushing to reopen schools early August so as to bridge the gap between the long school closures that we had prior. So of course, we're looking at training teachers so that they could do diagnostic tests, trying to provide resources and training so that they could actually use more blended form of learning or shift systems. And we're actually looking at a national platform, either incorporating one of the applications that is presented, and also Moodle, or integrating both, so that resources can be provided for teachers and students. With that, of course, there is a need for us to revise the national curriculum so that it is more current, especially during this time. I think at the lower level, which is the elementary, I don't think technology was a priority, but this event actually let them realize the need for them to integrate it within the classroom setting. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your very, detailed response. And it's good to hear that you have an interest in Colibri, but also, you mentioned some the teacher training. So perhaps we can then follow up with a bilateral discussion. I would like to mention we were having a technical issue when we started this session. We do have a slide just highlighting some of the key questions. So David, I understand the technical issue is over and you are able to project the slide just to some guiding questions for this session. Yes, so we just wanted to, before we begin the session, we had a technical issue, but we are happy to share with you that this particular session is going to be focusing on what are the member states' challenges to enable educators for distance learning, connectivity, and gender equality in the Caribbean, what training and support is needed to ensure that teachers are prepared to teach learners with diverse needs through remote and blended learning and teaching, specifically in the remote areas with low connectivity or with special needs. And then, of course, we want to focus on what are potential areas of collaboration with the Global Education Coalition members to address these challenges through concrete, realistic, and feasible action to support education in the Caribbean cluster of English and Dutch-speaking countries. So I just wanted to put this up for our member states and also to frame our dialogue. And we will now, without further ado, thank you, David. We will move forward now to our next member state, British Virgin Islands, Cayman Islands, or Curacao. I understand Curacao is with us.
Yes, we are.
Nurit, thank you very much. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hold on, let me just put my screen up right now. Okay, good morning. Yeah, this has been a very interesting morning so far, and indeed a lot of the challenges that we have been facing over the last several months are the same kind of challenges that have already been mentioned by the other members that have gone before us and the presentators. But I still like to go through what we have discussed prior to this in order to share with the rest of you what we have been experiencing. One of the greatest challenges that we had indeed was that large population of the pupils were unable to continue learning during the school closures, and also when the schools have reopened because of the social distancing, we also had the problem or the challenge that the learning could not continue. Part of it, of course, had to do with low to no connectivity and also access to devices or even enough devices in the homes. That is both for the teachers and also for the students, because often you have encountered that you may have a device or a couple of devices in the house. However, if you are the teacher and you have to also use the device to communicate with your students, or vice versa, you have several children in the house that need to make use of the devices, that seems to be one of the challenges that we have been encountering here in Curacao. We also encountered the challenge that the teachers realized that they were ill prepared for teaching using this new approach of online or blended modalities. And what we also noticed is that initially you would think that you are technology savvy, but when you are confronted with using specifically this type of modality, you realize that you have to have acquired other types of skills or additional types of skills in order to be able to provide the teaching the way that is required in this environment. We also face the challenge that the situation of being at home were very hard on some of the students, and it was hard also, especially for the students that had no connectivity to even reach them. As with most countries, also lack of a budget is one of the challenges, and also a national supported vision. And I specifically say national supported vision because it's something that as a government, we would like to have one vision that is supported by all the different school systems, school districts, from the primary, secondary, all the way to the university level, in order to be able to provide that equality, equity, and inclusion in education. One of the other priorities, and it's an initiative of the government, is to provide a national ICT infrastructure in order to provide that inclusion and connectivity through all the students, and even are thinking about models where during the day you are able to use the internet, for instance, because you have a broadband that you have acquired, and then in the evening when school is out, you can share that with the people that do not have the funding and resources to acquire internet themselves at their home. But with all of that, we have to also prioritize how to make sure that the infrastructure is secure, reliable, and also future-proof, that we do not put too little or too much at this time, realizing the amount of budget that is available. Also, one of the priorities that has to be looked at is the connectivity and the devices. How are we going to make sure that even if you do have the infrastructure, that also the people that are in need of having the devices actually do get the devices? And also the priority is to equip the educators to be able to function in this blended learning environment. And the last part that I would like to also discuss is what are the potential areas of collaboration that we have talked about. One of the things that we think is very valuable is to have software standardization throughout. Usually that has to do, of course, also with support, because everybody's using the same type of software, but also it usually helps also with the cost of it all. We also think that infrastructure consolidation is very helpful to be able to collaborate, efficient network management, and a national student tracking system. We know we've talked about several options today even. The question of the language is something also that is of importance, because we are Dutch primary in the school system. That is of consideration that needs to be addressed, and I would certainly love to hear more of the members what options are available in that area. And also about, we want to go in the direction of having the Office 365 for all the schools in order also to have a better connectivity. Supporting also and linking the national student tracking system with a platform for online learning, and last but not least, also the teacher training. That is what I would like to share with you today about Curacao and where we're at this point.
Thank you so much for your very, clear presentation on your key challenges, priorities, and areas for potential collaboration. Nuritska, we really appreciate this, and I'm sure we will open up room for dialogue following this discussion. Thank you very much. We will now move. Do we have which country would like to go next? We have Dominica, Grenada, Guyana, Jamaica. I know some of the countries are still having dialogue internally within their ministries of education.
Suriname.
Yes, Suriname.
Maybe Suriname can present. We didn't send in our presentation because we are in the middle of changing of government, so we didn't have the chance to send in our presentation. But I can. Hello.
Hello. Do you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we are hearing you.
Okay. Can I do my presentation?
Please.
Without a PowerPoint?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. First of all, thank you
share
all
the screen
for the presentation. We concerning Suriname, we actually did a survey on teacher readiness on ICT, and actually we had 336 school leaders who were participating on that survey, and we see that almost 60% of our teachers, they are not ICT ready. First of all, we see that when we ask them to use ICT educational learning material, they were not prepared, and we send out an how you say that, an instruction how to use that, but we instruction guide, but we did get from the field that most of our teachers were not ICT ready. So one of the things that we encounter is that a lot of teachers of Suriname are not ICT ready. That is one point. The second point is that the connection of internet connectivity. A lot of schools, about also about 60%, said that they are not connected to school, although they have a mediatek with computers, but they are not connected on the internet. A lot of teachers also said that they don't have a device in the form of a tablet or a laptop. So, and also, of course, teacher training is a challenge, because we have almost 12,000 teachers. And if we look at the interior where there's no internet connectivity, and we still have a partial lockdown in part of Suriname because of the COVID pandemic, then I also want to connect that with how do we reach those marginal groups where we don't have access to internet or don't have access to TV connectivity. So we are looking forward to low-tech modalities, but also on no internet connection solutions. So that's it from Suriname side. I can't hear you. Your microphone is still on.
Yes.
Hi. Can you hear me now? I was just muted, I believe. Yes. Do you hear me now?
Yes, we're hearing you, Farial. That's fine.
Thank you so much for the presentation from Suriname, because you also have the hinterlands and the remote areas where access is a real issue. And so going for a holistic approach where you have areas where you have blended approaches and low connectivity, I think it would be good to explore those strategies with Suriname. We also would like to, I don't know if Trinidad and Tobago are on board, but we also have Vivian Johnson from Jamaica with us. Vivian, are you with us? Because I understood from the Secretary General that Vivian Johnson was with us. We have with us a youth representative, Kevi, who has been very actively working with us, and we believe that the voices of youth are critical, and it would be wonderful to hear. Kevi, are you with us?
I'm with you.
Great. So welcome to this important consultation. I hope your exam went well today. I know you had an exam So thank you very much for coming on board, and we would like to hear your perspectives, Kevi, on what would be some challenges and priorities going forward.
All right, thank you. So before, is everybody seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I
kind of disappear. Yes, now it's better. Yes.
I came up with a short PowerPoint or slide share to show everybody about the impact that the youths and teachers are facing, not only in my country, but like in the rest of the Caribbean as well. So the first impact I have is the mental impact. Then there is the financial impact, the social impact, skill sets, and teaching. Now the mental impact would be the emotional, psychological, and social well-being of the students, meaning how students would fare away from school, away from the friends, away from this environment. The financial being, since the COVID-19 pandemic has occurred, a lot of students are not afford the same luxury as they had before because their parents might have wage cuts, they might not be working, they might be unemployed, etc. Now the social now, living and breathing in more or less an organized communities, especially for the purposes of cooperation and mutual benefit. Now, a lot of students gain a lot from learning from their peers, learning from their teachers, etc. So by having this away from them, then their social skills, to say, would be decreased. Then skill set, which was touched upon earlier in the presentation as well, which is the combination of knowledge, personal qualities, and the abilities that you've developed through your life and work. Now, skill set developed from students constantly going to school, developing new skills, learning from teachers, presenters, exams, which would help you develop your writing skills. These skills have now been reduced due to the online learning, etc., and uses of different platforms that would not necessarily enhance these skills. Teaching, no, not only youths are being affected, but teachers as well, and we cannot forget them because they are the most important part of this educational system. And now teachers not having the most suitable platform to teach from. For example, in our country, a lot of teachers are teaching from Zoom, they're teaching from Google, the Google website, I think it is Google Meet, sorry. And they do not know about Lab Exchange, they do not know about Colibri and stuff like this. So how do we support and mitigate the impact on our youths? First and foremost, I have connectivity to households, online libraries, just like Lab Exchange I've mentioned. Connectivity in terms of students might not have the necessary equipment. So for example, in Vinci, we have an initiative where the government would normally give out laptops to primary and I think fourth year in the secondary level. This can help with the connectivity to the households and help them learn, from online platforms. So the platforms for teachers to use, as mentioned earlier, persons are using Zoom, Google Meets, etc., which technically aren't suitable platforms for these teachers to interact with students. Now, art therapy, which I have highlighted, and I'm running out of time, but art therapy is used to help children and adults explore their emotions, provide self-esteem management, etc. As you can see there, it is the use of creative techniques, drawings, paintings, coloring, etc., that would help students or learners better examine their psychological and emotional undertones in their art. Next, I have to have a supportive relationship between school and home. Now, with this in-person interaction being damaged, schools and students can only communicate by online, by Zoom, Meets, Colibri, email. Now, having a supportive relationship between the school and home, teachers and students, this can help students to not necessarily feel the impact of being left out because the school is still checking on them, the school is still looking at them, and students will feel at a home while at home. if you get what I'm trying to say. And finally, I have some questions to post forward. So what should future teachers and students expect from the training and support that they would need for learning in diverse needs through the remote blending teaching and learning? Secondly, this one is directed to lab exchange. What is your strategy to spread lab exchange to the Caribbean territories, along with how to use it to the program learners? For example, we in St. Vincent, we do not know about lab exchange. So what is your plan to share it to us? And finally, what plans are in place for the collaboration to spread Colibri, lab exchange, Microsoft, SkillSet, etc., to these Caribbean territories that have not yet received these platforms? So what do you guys have in place to help spread it to countries like St. Vincent, countries like Dominica, like St. Lucia, which already has Colibri, but these other countries that do not have these learning platforms, how do you plan to spread it to us so that we too can enhance our learning? All right, and that is what I have planned. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, KV, for your thought-provoking questions and for your engaging presentation, really sharing with us the perspectives of the youth and also what are some of your key priorities going forward. So it is always a delight to hear from you. Thank you so much for being on board, and we will perhaps come to some of these questions. But I also understand we have with us Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, and St. Lucia. So may I?
Good afternoon. Am I being heard? I'll be as quick as possible.
Yes.
Challenges from Montserrat. As soon as COVID began, the first thing that hit us was the fact that we had an equity issue, not just among students, but among teachers. And so we went right away to get data to decide, how to best help our teachers and our students deal with the issues of hardware and software. And we got laptops for both. So right now, as we stand, students are back in the classroom, not all day, but for chosen days per week. And so we continue with the blended learning and teaching. So challenges were mainly with hardware and software and on both sides. For training, we did training. We did training to help our teachers, those who were not embracing the use of the software that was available in schools, and as well as what was available at home. But we won't mind further training in online course and blended learning that was suggested today. And also in terms of collaboration, we would like to work with or be assisted with the embracing and using of the lab exchange, the learning equality. And I know we didn't discuss video games, but I'm excited to hear about that. So we'd like to collaborate on that. On Montserrat, we're also trying to, or been discussing getting a national student tracking system. So that again would be an area for collaboration. We also want to start a national curriculum, so that would be further support. And a new buzzword for us, although we have inclusive education, I'm putting it in quotation marks here, that is something too we would like to collaborate on with our colleagues. And I'll also end with saying Office 365. Thank you. Hello?
Thank you very much, Hyacinth Bramble Brown, for your concise presentation, but which really was on the mark and highlighted some potential areas of collaboration. So we invite now St. Kitts and Nevis to come on board. And then we are going to be wrapping up the session and moving towards closing in the next 5 to 8 minutes.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure for us to be here, and I would like to share with you the perspective from St. Kitts and Nevis as it pertains to this discussion. I want to preface our conversation I'd like to preface our conversation.
There is some disturbance. I don't know what the disturbance is, but if you could help, let us know.
Terribly sorry. I'm sharing space with some of my colleagues. All right, good. Sorry about that. Thank you so much. I'm sharing space with several, a few of our colleagues who are on this call. I want to preface our presentation by noting that the whole notion of equitable access to quality education is really embodied in our education sector plan 2017-2020, where we are looking at education for all, embracing change and securing the future. So in a sense, the Ministry of Education in St. Kitts and Nevis is indeed committed to the notion of equitable access for all of our students. And our response to COVID-19 has been guided by this. And we've took a very phased and measured approach to our response to COVID-19. And our thrust for equitable access has really been driving our national curriculum enhancement project as well. So in our phased response, we first of all looked at preparing worksheets and exercises to give to students to take home. And while they were home, we provided online platforms through which they could access digital resources such as Flow Study and later with our Microsoft Teams account. That is to support the continued education of our students. And then we proceeded to procure devices for students and teachers who were disenfranchised. And we did, like Mantra, we would have administered some survey before the closure of schools, really to get a sense of how many of our students, which students did not have access to devices and or internet connectivity. And we've worked with local partners to really provide internet connectivity in homes. And the Ministry of Education procured some tablets for students to be able to use and laptops for teachers to use for delivery of online instruction. Then we proceeded to have onboarding of these teachers and students as we expose them to the Microsoft Teams platform, which is really the platform that the ministry would have decided upon using after a real rigorous process of examining several learning management systems and platforms that could meet our needs. And of course, our response involved also participating in several of the OECS initiatives to support a coordinated response to COVID-19. All that being said, when we look at what's happening in our present reality and some of our challenges, the areas that we see there's tremendous scope for support from our global partners are one, the continuous professional development of our teachers in two key areas, that is delivering remote and blended learning, and the second being leveraging the available online platform or platforms such as the Microsoft Teams platform, which we have licenses that we're using for here to really engage students in meaningful ways. Those are critical for our continuous professional development we foresee over the next few months. Two, electronic toolkits, and not just toolkits, but best practice strategies as well that would integrate well with our existing platform to enhance teaching and learning and allow us to digitize our curriculum documents and several of the resources we have on island. Three, assessments, and we don't want just to look at cognitive assessment tools, but psychosocial and developmental assessments that we can use, as well as delivery systems for these assessments in a distributed format, because that's our new norm, so to speak, where we have to interact with students and teachers in a remote and distant way, as well as in some cases in a limited fashion in brick and mortar face-to-face setting. And four, creating a sustainable ecosystem with when we want a sustainable approach to really having devices, reliable internet connectivity, and the supporting pedagogy in terms of supporting blended and remote learning and effectively integrating ICTs to enhance teaching and learning. And we see from the presentations today, such as Blackboard, we see an opportunity for collaboration on certification and training in online and blended learning. We're seeing through LabX the beginnings and what we think might very well work out to be a really nice option for digital or electronic resources to facilitate online learning. we clearly love to hear from the Microsoft representatives how what the offering can factor into how we can treat that as with our licensing that we have available here in St. Kitts and Nevis. But we do look forward to collaborating and indeed sharing with our partners. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I believe now we have St. Lucia. We invite you on board.
Yes, thank you very much, Harriet. This is Fiona Meyer, Chief Education Officer. In the interest of time, I will just speak briefly to some of the points that we had identified. And thank you to everyone for having us today. We're similar to many of the other colleagues. I think throughout the Caribbean, we have the same issues, the same challenges, a lot of the same expectations in terms of moving forward. For us, it's really important to identify as a challenge a clear understanding of what blended learning means, and that administrators and teachers, parents may have a different perception of that. Major issue continues to be, major challenge continues to be the devices, and many of my colleagues have spoken about that. The expectation that parents do have access to internet, or teachers have internet access. We found in many ways that can be a false assumption. So connectivity, infrastructure continue to be major challenges within the homes. The whole parental involvement as it pertains to blended approaches and what the expectations are of parents. They're not teachers. How can they facilitate? And maybe then for many of the parents, the fear that they're doing more damage than good. And so a lot of those thoughts came through our survey as well. The upskilling of teachers, we've done previous training, but still many people do not quite appreciate that there must be continuous upskilling done by many of our teachers. Training and support, the use of inclusive education, we're finding more and more a great need for it. Supporting special education, as we have found that this has been the group that has been most impacted negatively, unfortunately, because many of them weren't able to access and did not get the necessary support. So ICT and ICT integration as being tools for the blended approach continue to be significant to us. We look forward to collaboration, and in particular, we wanted to speak to certification of teachers. You know, sometimes we think, yes, let's train them, but with certification, it ups the game a bit for them in terms of having a qualification or certification in a particular area. It could be the use of a platform or in terms of ICT integration. So this is one of the areas. And we're really hoping that as we continue with the OECS as well, and training can happen for our teachers, and we appreciate this is the summer break, but I've always thought that on a voluntary basis, we can encourage teachers to continue to develop their skills in preparation for, hopefully, a reopening in September. So on behalf of our Schools Vision team, thank you for the opportunity to speak on the context that the St. Lucian education system finds itself in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fiona Meyer. It's really good to hear from you, and in some ways, your input also encapsulates and synthesizes some of the priorities and trends in the Caribbean region. Is there any country that may wish to make a presentation that I may have skipped? Kindly, please, this is a good moment.
Yes, Grenada here. I hope you're hearing me.
Yes, we'll take a few minutes quickly, because then I would also like to request our Director Orial Office, Dr. Claudia Uribe and Dr. Burhan Shakroon, if you don't mind, if you could just take a few minutes to wrap up, and then the floor will be yours for the concluding session.
Yes,
Thank
so
Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, yes. So Grenada, we're not quite prepared to present at this time. but we do have quite a few challenges. Some have been clearly articulated by our colleagues in the region. We do have similar challenges. I was wondering if it's possible for us to submit our information via email at a later date. That really would be helpful for
So
us.
I'll be there as soon as I'm finished, okay? All right, okay, bye.
Hi, Marcelia.
Yes, yes, as it
Yes,
relates to,
you can submit by email. Marcelia Henry, the floor is yours.
yes, thank you. Yes, thank you so much. As it relates to St. Martin also want to reiterate all of those challenges that were mentioned already by the prospective islands, because we are a small island development state and we share the same challenges. But few points that I want to emphasize and make known as it relates to St. Martin is that best practices as it relates to blended learning and remote learning are some of the ways that our teachers on St. Martin can benefit from it, for the fact that they were thrust into the usage of the digital world and utilizing this form of teaching that a number of them were not familiar and acquainted with. So therefore, how do we incorporate the blended learning into my new norm is something that St. Martin teachers can benefit from. Also, the point that was made by St. Lucia as it relates to certification of teachers in the particular platforms that were presented today is much welcomed by St. Martin. We will definitely, this is a way that we can enhance the preparedness of our teachers in continuing with this learning beyond the COVID-19 post and so forth. And as the school year is supposedly going to be open as of August the 10th, this would be a new, let's say, a new way, a new mode of providing learning experiences to our children. And definitely St. Martin is looking forward to having our teachers be certified in these various platforms, because what became quite apparent due to this present situation with COVID-19, that a number of our teachers are not familiar with the Microsoft, the Blackboard, the Lab Exchange, etc. So it is important to diversify or make them competent in as many platforms as possible. And maybe one more point that I can mention, due to the lack of time, that with St. Martin as well, as it relates to these particular platforms, it is important for us to also be able to have the necessary budget necessary to make these things possible. So with limited budget, we are curious to know what are some other alternative resources that we can tap into to still continue the learning process. So I will stop there due to the limited time.
Secretary General, thank you so much for your presentation and outlining the key priorities, and also the introduction of some of these online platforms in the Caribbean region. So most of the countries, I'm seeing some trends across the region. Equity and inclusion, of course, is at the center. ICT integration, continuous professional development, learning management systems, and enabling a sustainable ecosystem with devices, connectivity, and pedagogy. I'm seeing the need for resources such as toolkits and possible strategies to enable countries to work with these new innovative approaches. So it has been wonderful to listen to all member states. In the interest of time, I'm going to request our director of the Santiago office, Dr. Claudia Uribe. Are you with us? Thank you so much, Director, for being with us. And the floor is yours for the concluding remarks. And we also invite our Director, Burhan Shakroon, to come on board to discuss some of the priorities and next steps, having listened to the member states. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Faryal. And just to say, it has been really interesting to listen to all the interventions this day, both from our partners in the Global Education Coalition, but also from all the member states that have been present today. So I think this is very fruitful. In the interest of time, I want to hand over the microphone to Boren for his comments. So please, Boren, the floor is yours. Boren, are you with us?
Hello, Val. Are you with us? Is Burhan with us?
Yes, in theory, he is here. Let's see.
Colleagues, I think Beren may have stepped out for a few or it has been disconnected.
Yeah.
And so we may have to continue. Yes.
Okay, so without Beren, let me say I took notes on several of the common issues that have been discussed today that I think are important for our global coalition members to take away in terms of the needs of the countries that have been expressed today. And I have taken note of at least 12 issues that have been repeated during the presentations of our member states. And the first one has to do with connectivity. I think that clearly many of the countries here have expressed the need to expand this connectivity, and we're hoping that our global coalition partners can help us see of ways in which we can expand connectivity solutions in the countries of the region. In second place, the need to access more devices. We have seen that in many countries, there is still a lack of devices available for teachers and for students. And we think this is also an area where we can seek help from our global coalition partners. In the third place, we have heard from several countries the need to find solutions in several languages. The Caribbean is a region that has at least 4 languages of national languages, because if we talk about non-mainstream languages, we have more. So the importance from our coalition members to bring forward or to facilitate or to discuss the way in which we can bring all these solutions in the different languages of the region. Next, we have heard the member states discuss the needs in terms of teacher training, preparation, and certification. It's interesting, we heard from Blackboard of several of their programs in this regards, and also from Microsoft. So I think there's also the possibility of bringing solutions from them to bring forward for this specific issue. Another interesting thing that has been discussed is the need to leverage existing technology in the countries. We know that over the past decade or so, many countries have made large investments in terms of technology. And now that technology is there, it's important to see how we can leverage the power of this technology that's already installed in countries. So that's another area of collaboration. Also, I think that Faryal mentioned is, of course, there has been a common topic in terms of how to reach the most marginalized populations and finding solutions that are low tech or no tech. And I think here we heard from Colibri of very interesting possibilities, and also from our lab exchange of possibilities of bringing all these innovative solutions into low tech or no tech platforms. Another interesting comment that was made from countries was in terms of assessment. How can countries know whether students are effectively learning, whether
the learning objectives that can be set on these platforms and in these particular context. Are we making progress in terms of reaching those learning objectives, and how are we measuring whether students are learning what is expected? The other issue that has been common in the comments from countries has been the recognition that this environment has made parents take on a big responsibility as teachers. And how are we supporting parents in this teaching responsibility that they have had in this environment? And finally, I have also the comment of how in this situation that we're facing, how can we share best practices among countries? And this is also, there is also a lot of potential in this type of discussions and in bringing our partners on board to share what these best practices are among countries. So just to finish and to close this session, just to remind countries that you have a responsibility in starting this collaboration to work. Our members from the Global Coalition can only bring forward all their support if countries ask for the support. So I think this is a first step that countries that have already done their homework in identifying their needs will be best prepared to start coming forward with what types of solutions they need and what type of support they need to bring to get this global coalition active in supporting you. And for those countries that don't have this ready, it's important to identify these specific needs so that you can tap onto this big potential that is being brought forward. So I just want to close saying that this is a moment of incredible possibilities. I think that, as I think Faryal mentioned, we are on the fast track of innovating, of harnessing the power of technology, of making a big leap forward in our education systems. In spite of the circumstances, they are leading us to think differently. So I believe that this is a very important and very powerful time for education in the region. But I see Boren just joined us. So I'm going to close here and I'm going to turn the mic on to Boren. So welcome, Boren. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon to all colleagues. I was listening very carefully, but trying to understand also what are the needs. And I would like maybe without making kind of a very strong commitment, but I think we have a very clear asks from member states and from the discussion today. I would like to mention 5 of them, if you allow me, Claudia and colleagues. First of all, I see that the preparedness and the professional development of teachers for online learning and engaging in remote learning and in hybrid learning, as we see it all over the world, is a priority for many member states, as they have expressed that today. Also, equity and inclusion for all learners, and as we had in the global monitoring report today, and in the different moments we presented the report, all means all, and that means we have to make all the efforts to be and to have an inclusive models and inclusive engagement. There was also a third element of interest and request from member states about data management and for informed decision making. And this is of course important as part of the work that we are doing, how to collect the right data to respond to the challenges, particularly in a situation of a disrupted landscape and a situation that is dynamic and changing very fast. There was also a request and points toward more knowledge sharing, more resources and exchange of resources and information in repository of promising practices, of resources related to promising practices. Maybe the last point that I have also seen is that the capacity building for timely collection and analysis of the financing of education, and how to protect public finance in the context of the crisis and obviously in the post-crisis. Maybe Claudia and colleagues, I would like to restate what Madame Giannini mentioned in the beginning. UNESCO, together with all the partners that are engaged in the Global Education Coalition, are ready, stand ready to support. We have already plans and we presented some of them, and we will continue engaging and with the concrete actions, starting from the teacher training that we have discussed with the Blackboard, but many other initiatives that we hope to be designing and implementing in the next few weeks and months. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you to all colleagues for this opportunity to share and to engage.
Thank you, Bahrain. And I just want to turn over to Catherine Grigsby, if you want to have the final words in this meeting. Catherine, are you there? You need to turn on your mic, Catherine.
Yes, thanks a lot, Claudia. Well, actually, I would just like to join and endorse the points that you just raised. I think it was a very, an excellent wrap up, and also the points that Bahrain has just added to these conclusions. And I would like to say that there is a lot of challenges ahead, but at least we really have identified this common ground of where we could be working. And I think that now it's the time to really, as you rightly said, Claudia, to bring the countries together, our member states together, and move forward in the direction after having identified the needs, the challenges, and the priorities. So we stand by their side, and we would like also to serve as a bridge, if we can, in this collaboration also with the members of the Global Coalition. And I'm very grateful for their presentation, for showing us also alternatives and innovative ways of responding to this huge challenge. And I would like to thank all the presenters and of course, our member states for their presentations as well. They were very informative, but also thought-provoking. And I think that, we stand ready to assist and to continue collaborating. Thank you also, Claudia, for your fantastic wrap-up and for your presence all throughout this session, which is really, helpful. And for your guidance and leadership also, because you're leading this education challenge in our region, the Latin America and the Caribbean, and also for headquarters. We really appreciate very much the support you have given to the team of education and to all of us, really, facing this huge challenge. So thanks a lot, and stay safe and take care. Thanks.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Catherine. Thank you, Catherine. And just to say that we're ready to support from ODIALC, and just to wish you well and wish you a very happy afternoon. Stay safe, stay healthy. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.